Greetings, children. Captain Disillusion here. Times are changing. This year, the first 3D television channel goes online in America. Of course, it's from ESPN and will broadcast exclusively sporting events like football games. Because if there's one thing you need to see in exquisite detail of all 3 dimensions, it's a bunch of dudes smashing into each other. But it is a wake-up call. Web video is a competitive field and one has to keep up. I realize that if I'm going to compete with the many professional video bloggers coming at you in trendy jump cuts from their living rooms, I have to do something really special. So, I've gone 3D. And I've mastered state-of-the-art 70s green screen technology, so you don't have to get bored while I talk. But most importantly, I've learned to analyze view statistics so that I can cater my content to the audience and maximize exposure and profitability. So, why don't you take a little break out on the patio, ladies age 18 to 44, because the other 86% of my demographic and I have a few manly topics to discuss, like football. That's right. Now, you've all been requesting this video for a really long time, so let's do it. Psych! To the extreme! Gentlemen, I give you NFL Fantasy Files.
This super popular compilation of videos features star football players performing unbelievable stunts in practice in an effort to persuade you to pick them for your fantasy football league. But turns out it's an award-winning viral video campaign for Reebok and NFL.com, designed and produced by a New York City-based creative agency called Blue Room. They used some badass and visible special effects to make celebrity athletes look cooler. The campaign proved so successful, they make a series of Fantasy Files clips every year, but a certain bunch have gone mega viral and withstood the test of time.
Now, as good as these professional athletes are, they're not capable of defying probability and the laws of physics. Whoa! But the clever and subtle visual effects used to achieve these daring illusions are fun to decipher. So, let's take a look at some highlights.
Chris Cooley positions himself behind the wall, but the swish pan from the pass serves as a transition to a shot of Cooley behind the wall where a violent-looking hole has already been pre-cut. A simple digital touch-up masks the hole in the few frames where it's visible prior to impact. Cooley thrusts his hand through the hole, and an elegant animation of dust and debris does the rest. Note the dust disappearing completely before the camera starts to reposition. A moment later, the football is placed in Cooley's hand, though a clean background plate is used to hide this fact, and Cooley emerges victorious. Cut 2. Jason Campbell on the field. He throws a pass, then another almost 2 seconds later, which miraculously catches up to the first. But in fact, the real footballs land downfield, masked by the match-moved background plate, while 2 computer-generated footballs bump and fall into the hands of the receivers, who stand motionless to make the animator's job just a little easier. Cut 3. Marcus Colston in practice. He settles in a steady shot from which a clean background plate is generated. He pretends to catch balls handed to him, much like during the game. What? That joke brought to you by the little swishes that made it look like the footballs flew in from frame right. Cut 4. Mark Bulger, and here's where things get tricky. He throws a pass right into a swish zoom transition to a separate shot of the bulky gentleman where the yard marker is hit by someone else from a much closer distance. The zoom out retains the guy from the close-up until Colston's body digitally wipes him away, and this amazing play is repeated twice more. Cut 5. Back to basics with Chris Chambers. The fanboys mime throwing passes, letting their footballs drop to the ground behind them as Chambers does the dance, complete with close-range ball-on-ball action. The momentary cover is enough for most of us to forget that the practice footballs at the fanboys' feet are the very same ones they pretended to throw. Cut 6. A truly classic play with Mason Crosby, using a classic digital wire removal technique originally developed by Industrial Light and Magic back in the early 90s. The real balls go one way, the CG balls go another, and so it goes. And finally, Cut 7. Lawrence Maroney passes in front of a real SUV. As he hustles and gets ready, The vehicle is quietly driven just out of range. Maroney launches ahead and does a precise dive and roll onto a mat on the lawn. In this key moment, all activity is paused and the SUV is rolled back into position. The camera captures a full reference shot of the car and then, on command, action is resumed. Later, a compositing geek spends a night intricately marrying the image of the car into the footage of Maroney's jump, complete with shadows, transparency, and a nearly invisible morph transition into the final real shot. Simply amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, this breakdown is brought to you by the great taste of Disillusionables Chunky Matter. What's the matter? It's Disillusionables.
You know what? This isn't right. This whole thing just doesn't feel right. I always tell you not to make uninformed assumptions. But in my zeal to be successful, I turn around and do that very thing. I assumed that every single one of you has two properly functioning eyes to enjoy a 3D episode, and that's probably not the case. I assumed that view counts and demographic stats are accurate and reliable, and they're not always. Worst of all, I assumed that simply summing up what average viewers expect and serving it up to you will make you happy. But I'm not so average, and if you like me, maybe you're not so average either. I'm sorry I stereotyped you, but don't worry, I'll keep doing what I do, the way I like to do it. But now I'm afraid it's time for me to go, kids. A fourth grader in Pasadena just realized she's not average and is freaking out. I can't help feeling responsible. Remember, love with your heart, use your head for everything else.
Captain Disillusion!